Hi, everyone. It's working. Thank you, Freddie, for the lovely introduction. Thanks to you, the board members, and Jesse for inviting me here to speak. I was really excited when you asked me to come here to speak, not only because of being here, but also because you asked me to talk about the demographics and trends in mobility and how that's affecting your business. And I have lived and am living the global trends in mobility right now. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me tell you a little bit about myself. And while I do that, I don't want you to see me as a speaker who's here to talk about the future of mobility and global trends. I want you to see me as your customer, whose needs have evolved over time in response to some of the forces I'm going to talk about today. So, I've been an expat for almost 25 years, which is a little less than half my lifetime, and I hesitated about sharing that, but I am not a millennial. And I'm not even raising millennials, they're the next generation. So as Freddie said, I was born in Cameroon, and I grew up in Greece. I spent my formative years there, and I left on my global journey out of my own initiative when I was in my mid-20s. I have moved as a single person, initially as a student. Then I moved with my partner, later became my fiancé, then became my husband, and later we moved with our family of 5. I have made sponsored moves and self-initiated moves. And most of my moves, I thought at the time, were traditional expat moves. But I'm going to get into that in a little bit. For a big chunk of our life together, I would say almost 90%, my husband and I were living in different countries, actually working in different countries, which were not necessarily the country where our home was based. So to give you a little bit of background on that, when we started our life together, he was a management consultant. So this means he would leave home on Monday mornings or even Sunday evenings, come back on Thursday evenings. He would be working in a different country or in a different state when we're in the US. So we lived in Paris and LA, and he was pretty much on that same schedule. During that time, my jobs were more traditional. I was local. I wasn't traveling. And when we decided to leave LA, we wanted to make our home in Vienna, Austria. He's Austrian. But neither of us was working in Vienna. So we both got jobs elsewhere. He was working in Germany at the time. I was working here in Leiden for my employer from LA. So I transferred, but I transferred to the Netherlands. So we were both working in different countries during the week, and we would meet in Vienna at our home every other weekend, so not even every weekend. Then we moved to, before that, he got a more traditional job, so he was no longer a management consultant, but still he was not working in Vienna, even though I had moved to Vienna by then. This time he was working in Bratislava, which was not a flight away. Thankfully, it was a drive. It was a 55-minute drive, which he would make every day to go to the office and come back to Vienna in the evening. And after that, we moved to Zurich. Again, we weren't really based there. I mean, I was, because my work was local, but he was all over the place, because his job was EMEA oversight, and therefore he was traveling among the countries that were under his jurisdiction. Jurisdiction, it's not the word. But again, we weren't in the same place. So during our whole time together up to that point, we had been apart. We were not a traditional married couple, and we had had kids by that time. So you can imagine the shock when he got a local job in Zurich. And he was home almost every evening. That created more than a little bit of tension. So now he's back, outside the country. And he's working in Germany. He has a home there. And he has a home in Zurich, where he sees our kids. We're not married. And I have a similarly fragmented life. My new husband lives 2 weeks in Zurich and 2 weeks in Boston, where his children are. And he works both there and in Lausanne, which is 2 hours away from Zurich, and spends some time there and some time in Zurich. Are you confused yet? Or So the reason why I'm telling you all this is to say that I have lived and I'm living the different models of mobility that I'm about to talk to you about. And I am familiar with both the challenges they represent and the needs for support. And that's why I'm really passionate about being here and talking to you about that. So these experiences, by the way, also sparked my desire to write this book and to spend close to 10 years doing research and writing about cross-cultural transitions and the challenges of leading a globally mobile life. And they also sparked my passion for helping expats deal with those transitions a little bit better and perhaps avoid some of the struggles that I had been through myself. So I'm also a coach working with people going through these kinds of transitions. And most often is, as I was saying yesterday at dinner, it's when people go through the struggles. Like, people do not come to me to help them make a great transition, which I think is a huge shame, but they come when they actually stumble and they need help getting back on track. So this was a little bit about me. Today, I want to talk to you about 3 things. One is the 2 big trends that I see affecting your industry right now and that are shaping the demographics and the different models of mobility. Then I want to talk about what those trends imply for the needs of this new kind of expat. And last but not least, I want to talk about why you should care, what this means for your business and how I see it from my perspective. Before I get into that, though, I would like to get a sense of who's here, if that's okay with you. So if you don't mind raising your hand, if the following applies to you, that would be great, just to get a sense. Who here works for a company that provides moving services only and nothing else, just moving stuff? Okay, thank you. Who works for a company that provides relocation services only, no moving? Okay, thank you. Who works for a company that provides relocation and moving services? Great, thank you. Who's in the wrong room? Okay, nobody, that's great. Wrong conference? No? Okay, all right, excellent. Then I'm really glad that everyone who's supposed to be here is here. So our topic, trends. One mega trend that I haven't identified it myself, but that's evident, is new kinds of assignments. Now, if I were talking to you 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, I'd be talking about traditional expat assignments. And you all know what those are, but just in case there's still someone in the wrong room, I will go over them quickly. These are when an employee moves to a different country for a longer term, so anytime between 1 year and 4 years. And their family, or the partner or children, follow along on the move. After that time period, they move on to the next assignment or they go home. Now, I would like to open a parenthesis here to mention that there's a kind of a derivative type of assignment that's becoming more popular these days, and that's one-way or permanent relocations. And that's when somebody new moves to a new country, but there is no prospect of them returning. There's no commitment on either side to come back or to go somewhere else after that. And usually that can be company-initiated or employee-initiated, and it usually covers a specific need in a specific location. But for our purposes here, I'm going to consider those to be part of traditional expat assignments because the average initial investment in relocation is broadly the same as in the traditional ones. So these are the kind of the traditional category. But today the landscape has changed. And again, I don't need to explain to you that there's different kinds of assignments that are becoming more popular, especially with younger and mostly single employees, or in cases where it's problematic to move the partner or the family. But I still think there's some value in being specific about what we're talking about here in order to draw the implications for the needs of the customers. So there are quite a few different ways of distinguishing those assignments, depending on the source you're looking at. I've identified the following three that are the most important or the most relevant for you, and those are short-term assignments, frequent business travel or extended business travel or international business travel, and cross-border commuting. Now, short-term assignments are like traditional expat assignments, only shorter. They last anywhere between one month and 6 months. Usually they are, again, used for specific projects or to fulfill, like when a specialized skill is needed in a location or when the local workforce needs to be trained. So they're pretty compact and manageable. Then you have extended business travel. And that's when the employee is based at home, but they travel to many different locations, often weeks at a time. And here I would like to include a subset of that, which I call the traveling specialist. And that's a person who's rotating among different locations where their expertise is needed, or in the case of a regional manager or CEO of a multi-region business, in different locations that, again, are under their responsibility. So, for example, when we lived in Vienna, my husband was based in Bratislava, but he was also responsible for all of Eastern Europe. So in addition to being in the office, he would travel to Czech Republic and Hungary and Poland and go through all these countries on a regular basis. The third category, cross-border commuting, is when you're based at home, but you're not working at home. You're working in a different country, different location during the week, coming back home on the weekends. In all these alternative types of assignments, the partner and family don't follow, as is the case in the traditional expat assignments. Now, it's pretty clear that the world is moving in that direction, in the direction of alternative assignments, as the numbers show. So there's different surveys again, showing pretty much the same trend. For example, between 2008, in 2008, traditional expat assignments represented about 2/3 of all global assignments, and in 2017, they represented 45%, so going down. Short-term relocations grew from 14% to 22% during the same period. Cross-border commuting and other alternative assignments, again, grew from 23% to 33%. And the trend is projected to stay the same. Most companies, again, based on different surveys, agree that they're going to have much more, that they're going to grow at a higher rate. They're going to have much more short-term assignments, much more commuting, much more international business travel, and that the traditional expat assignments are going to pretty much stay the same. Now, why have these models emerged? I hinted at it earlier. There's a lot of forces at play here, and I think it's easier if we distinguish it between the two broad categories of factors, which is the individual side, the supply side in terms of mobility, and the business side, the demand side. So on the individual side, people are just less willing to move for work. Again, numbers are going down. And why is this happening? Because somebody talked about this, FIDI actually talked about this earlier, we're moving away from the traditional family structure, the traditional expatriate family, which was the main earner, the expat assignee, followed by the non-working partner and children to the new location every time. We're kind of moving away from that, and the traditional model is changing. Now, what are some examples of these changes? You have many more dual career couples, where a relocation, in many cases, has to accommodate both their careers. And if that doesn't happen, then the relocation doesn't happen, or one person goes, one person stays behind. You have more same-sex couples who are not as willing to move to any location. There are certain locations where their partnerships or even their marriages are not recognized. And that has implications for residence permits and work permits, insurance coverage, the works. Not everybody is willing to go through that, or not everybody is willing to split. There's locations that are not safe for them. Again, reluctance to take on assignments. You have families with children that have learning or other kinds of disabilities or health issues. They're also not as keen to move to locations where they are not sure they're going to get the support they need. You have increasingly families with aging parents who need taken care of. Again, that makes it really hard to be flexible to move across the globe. And finally, you have the demographic changes that I'm about to talk about that make certain kinds of assignments, again, the alternative ones, much more attractive for people. So these alternative assignments are meant to accommodate all these different needs on the individual side. But also on the business side, you have the pressure to cut costs, which is making those assignments much more attractive. Why? Because they're more flexible, because they have shorter-term planning horizons, because their packages are not as fat compared to the expatriate, like the traditional exit packages, because they can be reversed much more easily and in a less costly way. So add to that globalization and the fact that technological advances have made those assignments vastly more viable. For example, it's easier, it's cheaper, it's more reliable to travel and to use communication technology than it was. So this makes these assignments not only needed, but also possible. So the rise in non-traditional alternative expat assignments is one trend. And the other mega trend I already alluded to, is the fact that there's a larger number of younger, mostly single employees entering the global workforce. I am, of course, referring to millennials, or Generation Y, who are now in their mid-20s to mid-30s, according to the general consensus. That's not clear. And they represent about 40% of the global workforce, but they're projected to represent up to 3/4 of that global workforce in 2025. So that's the majority of your customers. A lot has been written and said about millennials, but what is important for us to know today, here? The first thing is they want to move. They've been raised internationally, a lot of them. They see, they expect to have at least one international assignment in their career. They see, 98% of them sees travel as an opportunity to grow, both professionally but also personally. So they're very eager. Some call them global volunteers. They're very eager to move, and they don't mind. Actually, they prefer to have shorter-term, more flexible assignments. So they're the audience for those. They're also, at the same time, more mobile and cheaper to move, because compared to the senior traditional expats and their families, they're mostly single. They don't have a lot of stuff, so easier to send them to different places. The third thing it's important to know is they love technology. They have been raised with technology. They want to use it everywhere in their lives. Why not moving as well? And finally, they're very hands-on. They want to take autonomous decisions. They want to pick and choose and customize and personalize their experiences. So what do these two key trends, the new kinds of assignments and the emergence of, well, the overwhelming emergence of millennials in the global workforce, imply for the needs of these new customers? So new customers, new needs. I did a quick survey as I was preparing this talk, and from that and combined with my own experience, I've identified 5 areas where these new kinds of expats need support. The first area, which will come as no surprise, is immigration and taxation advice. Where am I taxed? How do I keep track of how many days I spent in which country? How do I calculate my tax obligations in different countries? How do I make sure I have proof for where I was when? It is so easy to get in trouble if you're sloppy about that or if you don't have good advice, and I've been there, and it's expensive, and you can find yourself liable to different jurisdictions. Not fun. The second area that's really important is financial planning. How do I manage my finances when I'm between places? And that also includes questions about pension planning or social security or insurance coverage. So how do I deal with that? I need advice. Third area, storage. Funny enough, new expats don't have as much stuff, but maybe they want to store stuff. They don't move as much stuff with them, but maybe they want to store it. What options do they have besides, their parents' basement? What's cost effective for them? What's practical? What's flexible? The fourth area is all the practical, all the logistics of leading this lifestyle. Travel scheduling, short-term accommodation. Is it Airbnb or hotel or furnished apartment? What's best for my needs? Healthcare. If you have a health condition but you live among different countries, do you have health providers in every country? Again, who helps you with working through that? And finally, an area that's not so much about numbers, but it's often overlooked, I think, but it has to do with the cost of this lifestyle and maintaining a balance between work and personal life. These new kinds of assignments, as much as they satisfy a number of needs, are extremely taxing on both those undertaking them and the families, if there's families that are left behind. You are basically neither here nor there. You are working somewhere, your family is not there. If you have a family, you're working like crazy. When you go back, you are trying to catch up for everything you've missed. So where is yourself in the process? Well, nowhere. People don't take care of themselves. There's studies that frequent business travel or commuting has a detrimental effect on health, and of course, by extension, performance. So it doesn't work from the individual side, it doesn't work from the company side. These people need help managing this work-life balance. They need help taking care of themselves, both the physical aspect and the emotional aspect. They need help staying connected to their loved ones when they're away. Their loved ones need help coping, because even though their lives don't necessarily change, they still go to the same schools, they still have the same jobs, they live in the same place, they are different because they have to lead their lives without a key part of the family being around. So this is the kind of help they get from psychological help, so from professionals, from coaches, even getting a virtual assistant to take care of the practical stuff so you can have more time to spend with your family or to spend on yourself is a huge value. So again, to sum up, I see the big substantive needs as being these 5: immigration and taxation, financial planning, storage, practical aspects of the moving lifestyle, and then managing the work-life balance and self-care for people moving. But I also want to talk about a sixth factor that is not so much a substantive need, but it has to do with the way these new kinds of expats do business. And it's becoming more and more important as more and more millennials are entering the market. And this factor is the fact that they do more themselves, and they like to do that online. So millennials want to do more themselves, as I said already. They want to make their own decisions. And when it comes to moving, that changes their approach towards movers. So I've often heard they want to be able to research online, be able to compare pricing structures, get quotes, compare quotes, organize everything, ideally without any physical contact until the actual physical move. They prefer to make their own decisions. Often they have a lump sum they need to administer. So again, that's different from traditional expat moves. Sometimes they also have to do things on their own. And that's because they don't have the same kind of organizational support as traditional expats do. Maybe it's because the moves are self-initiated. Again, they're eager to move, so they don't necessarily get the same support. Or their company doesn't have a specific policy for these non-traditional assignments. So the general expat assignment policy applies, but that may not necessarily cover all their needs. Or last but not least, because they don't go through a full-blown relocation, they're often perceived as not needing as much support, when the opposite is actually true. So because the needs of non-traditional expats are not as well understood, they often just get a sum of money and they have to figure it out themselves. And they and their families end up having to do stuff themselves. Now, what does all this mean for the moving industry? I'll share the bad news first, but I've already shared the bad news. The bad news is there's not as many traditional expat moves anymore. The other kinds of moves are growing, so that means potentially fewer moving services required. But what are the good news in this? This situation is creating a market opportunity. These new needs are creating an opportunity for somebody who's going to specialize in fulfilling all those needs and who's going to make life easier for these new kinds of expats. Now, what do I mean specifically? From my perspective, here's a few things to think about. And maybe as I go through them, you can assess where you stand. I would focus on the customer and try to get a sense and understand their exact needs. And that might not always be easy because they're so used to doing things themselves that they don't always feel like, oh yeah, I'm cool. But really try to dig deep and understand their needs. And then provide them with a comprehensive package or service that fulfills those needs and streamlines their experience. Give them tools and services that they can pick and choose from or customize or personalize, and allow them to do that online. Now, if we move to the business side, again, surveys show that a lot of what mobility departments and HR departments do when it comes to expat assignments is compliance, immigration and taxation, and assignment administration, instead of spending time on what's supposed to be more important for them, again, according to the surveys, which is strategic workforce planning, candidate screening, making sure the right people go to the right places. I'm guessing that they wouldn't mind outsourcing a big part of that compliance work or that admin work. So it would be a win-win for them. The third thing I would do is, if I haven't done that already, I would ramp up my online presence. And by that I mean, websites, online assessment tools, surveys, ratings. I would make it user-friendly. I would capture and engage my customers. I would stand out for them online with proven credentials or with, for example, membership in this organization or public surveys. I would make sure my customers are able to assess me and know what they're getting. I would have killed during those years of leading the neither here nor there life to have somebody who really understood my needs and would just make my life easier and provide me with the support to satisfy those different needs, but without having to go through all sorts of different providers. So, to sum it up, fewer traditional expat assignments mean less need for traditional moving services. But there is a need for the all-in-one global citizen specialist. And maybe some of you are way ahead of me already, and you're probably already, I know you are expanding your range of services and you're rethinking your business models. So one could look at the situation and see only the negative consequences of these new expats and these new needs, and one could look at the same situation and see the opportunities that are right there for whoever is bold enough to take them. Thank you.
Any questions? Please raise your hand. Coming.
Thanks, Katia. Always a bit scary to hear about our expats changing. And of course, as we're movers, and we like to move stuff, that's what we do, we move stuff. Now, millennials have less stuff, as you said, right? Is it irreversible, meaning as they grow older, they may start collecting more stuff again? Have you any insight in that? Give me good news.
I'm not optimistic about that, because it's a philosophy. I don't know how you were. We weren't like that at their age. They're much more, and I do have millennials in my life. I'm not just like making this up. They're much more international, flexible, light in their outlook. Yeah, maybe they will accumulate stuff, but I don't necessarily see that. So do we wait to see what happens when they grow up, or do we try to accommodate them? It's a tough decision. I would make my services available and tailor them to them right now, because now they're young and now they're moving, and these new kinds of assignments are not going to go away very soon. So again, even if you have stuff, you're moving for 6 months, or you're not even moving, really, you're not going to move your stuff. So it's a combination of the two trends, right? That's not making me very optimistic about the fact that there's going to be more need for moving. Yeah, but that's me, yeah? That's my perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. I got a question, and this is now about the work values, about the changing demographics. So you've been talking about millennials, Generation Y. I'm also Generation Y person. So from your talk, it implies that these are highly eligible global volunteers that can go abroad, back and forth. So do you think there are any potential liabilities, disadvantages that they bring to their move abroad as compared to the traditional assigned expats, like, let's say 20 or 30 years ago? Because maybe if there are certain liabilities, they might make another move, and that would be good for the relocations industries.
Yeah, well, you said it. They're much more willing to move for the sake of moving. What I notice and read about is that they're less loyal to one employer. So yes, they move somewhere, and then another opportunity comes up, why not take it? And they're light enough, and they're able to do it, and the new kinds of assignments allow them to do it. So I see that as a little more problematic for the companies, assuming that's their business model. On the other hand, and I didn't talk at all about the gig economy, but they're also a strong force behind that. So I wouldn't call it liability. I think the world is changing, and it's just, you know, it's a new model, it's a new paradigm. But yeah, they're definitely much easier to go from one employer to the other. Yeah. I don't know if that answers. Yeah, sort of. Oh, yeah.
All right, yeah. First a comment and then a follow-up question just to provide something. I'm going to reference a worldwide ERC event, 2015 in Boston, and a session I went to, millennials, and they described and they read out the survey, and they asked the following questions, or described the young people this way. They said they're looking for wonderful experiences in life. They want to see the world. They want to make a difference. They want to embrace the latest technologies and use it to their advantage and make the world a better place. And would you agree that's, yeah. And the survey was from 1956.
Wow. Wow, yeah.
So nothing has changed in regard to the way young people look at the world. So anyway, with that start premise, my question is, and you described, I thought, very well.
If I may ask, where? Yeah. Where is the survey conducted?
I don't remember. I can get it for you. It was
no, like location-wise.
It was in the United States.
I believe that.
Yeah, definitely in the United States.
Yeah.
So I do caveat that.
Yeah.
I liked your concept of supply and demand. So my question really is, do you see the relationship between the supply of talent and the demand, or the whichever is supply and demand, and the corporate sponsored relocation environment, ecosystem, that those, especially in the younger generation, are going to push further to say, let me do more myself, give me options, I want to take control, versus perhaps the older generation, which was because they didn't have the technology, you take it all, you do it all, I'm at your whim to decide what is best for me, or taking more control where they decide how they want to spend resources of the organization, where the boss says, you're going to go to Bratislava, I'll see you Tuesday, and you find your way there.
So you're asking me if I see this as a trend, or
well, I think it's out. Do you see that as wanting to take more control of the relocation?
Yeah.
We definitely see it, but is that an attitude, a thought process, or is it just because we can? Or how do you see that? What are the reasons for that, that trend, I think, increasing in the future?
Yeah. I think it comes from both sides. I think, yes, they're definitely more hands-on, so they really want to know what they're getting and to get what they really need. And frankly, that would help traditional expats as well, if that were possible, because my book and my actual research was with traditional expats. They get standard relocation services. They have different needs. They're not always matched. So having more control of the process would actually be huge for traditional expats as well. So I'm glad millennials are going in this direction, because they're taking charge of the process, which, you know, it makes their life much easier. And of course, it also comes from the business side, because they don't understand what exactly they need, or they think they don't need that much. I mean, we didn't get any relocation support, and most people I surveyed didn't get any relocation support where they're doing international business travel or when they're commuting across border, because you're not really moving, your home is in one country. You don't really need, to move stuff. And so yeah, so it comes from both ways. It's both a philosophy, but it's also a necessity, I think. And we just have to keep talking also to the business side for them to realize that no, they do need support. It's just a different kind of support than what we've been used to so far. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the things I noticed when reading your book were the checklists that you had been developed. I think one of the biggest things, we have a number of clients in the room, and I think is a failed expat assignment. And a lot of times people are just not prepared. Is that just something you developed over time from just so many times of failing.
You think?
Because I saw significant differences in the understanding from between the spouse and the expat and really understanding what the needs were in the next location. And it was just really interesting to see when you kind of write it all down and then what the expectations were for the children and just for the next move, just to be prepared. So it was just interesting to see, and I'd love to hear more about how you developed that.
Yeah, definitely born in struggle, the book. Look, the book is very comprehensive, and I've had a couple of people tell me, it's overwhelming, like it stresses me if I'm going to leave and I have to do all that stuff. Like, no, just be aware. Be aware that you need to have a conversation with your partner. I didn't even do that, for some moves, and I ended up being miserable because I moved somewhere where there are no professional opportunities for me, and I had to scramble to figure something out. Or there was, when I moved to Vienna, I was like, I don't want to be here, I'm not going to do anything. And I just wasted my time feeling, like a victim. So just know that this is stuff you need to be aware of. And if your children are acting out when you moved somewhere and it's only been, 3-4 months, if you know what to expect, at least you understand. No, they're not going through puberty. They're just adjusting, and it's a normal process. So this is all, even when you don't have a lot of stuff to check all the checklists, this just gives you food for thought. You're aware of what's happening. You're aware of what you need to do. You're not clueless like I was for some of my moves. So again, it's very comprehensive, but you pick and choose what works for you. And I think it makes life easier to know what to expect. Yeah. Definitely, though, it came from mistakes. Yeah.
No more questions for Katia? I want to thank you, Katia, for being here, giving us the insight that we needed. What I remember is that we have to keep our focus on the customer in the end. And if he's changing or she is changing, then we need to change and adapt our services to that person. Correct?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Thanks. Round of applause, please.